Which offensive support carries the most in Guild Wars 2 PvE? The recent balance patch of June 24th of 2025 is actually changing quite a lot, I would say. It's a very good balance patch in a lot of ways. And today we want to take a look at what changed and how I would rate the offensive supporters in group scenario, Guild Wars 2 PvE. As always, big shout out to all my supporters in YouTube, Twitch and Patreon that help me keep the lights on. And now let's jump straight in. Short disclaimer at the beginning, of course, that's again a personal tier list. It's my take on the situation. That doesn't mean it's the absolute truth. I try to be objective or at least give you my arguments why I think like that. It's like a subjective take on the matter. So I think a support that carries very hard as an offensive support is something that actually has a lot of flexibility, a lot of boon output, while still having decent damage. I will take all of that into consideration. Maybe it also has some kind of healing support and a lot of CC and stuff. That is all what I think is very good. But utility is the name of the game, I would say, as a support. Especially as an offensive support, if you have a lot of utility, you can help out your group way more than if you have just a little bit more damage. But if you have really high damage, sometimes it's also worth bringing that support. So we will talk about that when we get to the builds that I mean here. Of course, we talk about the tiers here. There is only the impossible tier and the others are just very usual from C to S tier. The impossible tier is just because in Guild Wars 2 an offensive supporter needs to have either alacrity or quickness access and decent damage. So that means that if you don't have access to alacrity or quickness sharing, you are impossible to be played as an offensive support. So we have some roles that are already filling that. So let's put all the core classes in there. That's just straight up true. It's not possible for core classes to fill that role. That's just Arena and its design decision to make it like that. And there are also some other classes, even elite specs, that can't fill that. So we will put them in here as well. So that's the impossible tier. Just classes that can't provide alacrity or quickness to their subgroup permanently. Let's now start with Warrior. Warrior is interesting because I would say Warrior got buffed with the recent balance patch quite hard. It is especially the quickness Berserker is actually really easy now to upkeep quickness, which was a big problem before. It still has the, so to say, issue that it's a little bit like you have to have a target to actually keep up the boons. But if you do that, I think it's actually a really decent build. I would say it's not S tier yet as an offensive support. It has good damage, but it's single target for the most part. And it is not, it has power and quantity. I think both builds are very viable and very good. I think for me, it's like low S tier or high A tier. One of those two. We will see where I put it for now, but I feel like it doesn't have the flexibility and the utility to make it worth to pick it over S tier builds. So that's why I would leave it for now in high A tier, but it's a very good build. Then we have Bladestone. Bladestone has crazy good DPS as alacrity DPS, but it has again the same issue that Warrior has. It doesn't have the greatest utility. I would say for that, I would say if it has high damage, that's why I put it in low A tier. But you can also make the argument because Berserker I think is a little bit more flexible and has better boon output that I would put Berserker above Bladestone. So let's put Bladestone in B tier for Bladestone. High B tier, I guess, but that's where I would put it. It's still very good, don't get me wrong, especially if you can play it correctly. It has really good DPS output. So in some situations, that's actually way more likely to be played than S tier builds if you don't need the utility. But I'm just rating in general, I think Bladestone is not as broken as an offensive supporter. Let's talk about Revenant next. Revenant, all three elite specs nowadays can actually fill the offensive support role. So let's start with Herald. I think Herald is interesting. Herald is like one of the lowest offensive support DPS that you can play. It has very low DPS, but it has very good boon uptime. So now it's really hard to judge where to put it because it's so easy to upkeep the boons here and also help your group. But the DPS is so low that I think personally it's a B tier build for me, for boons, I guess. Because it's like you play it if you wanted really safe boon uptime, but you will not carry your group with DPS. And you will also not have the craziest amount of utility because you don't have like reflex, for example. You have no access to H's and that kind of stuff, or not that well at least. And I think it's just maybe low A tier, but for me it's still, don't get me wrong, every build that is playable as an offensive support can be played as an offensive support. So even C tier builds, in my opinion, can be played in almost any encounter. Just saying, I would rather have something that is an A or S tier than a quickness Herald at this point. Maybe sometimes I'm a little bit harsh, maybe it's worthwhile running in groups that are mediocre at the game. Then I think it can be actually a very good pick. Let's put it for that reason in low A tier. But I feel like it's in somewhat decent groups, the DPS is just very low and that really is like hurting the build. Then we have Renegade. Renegade is actually interesting. If we would talk about Fractals, we should check out my Fractal tier list. Then it's S tier. But in PvE, in raids, strikes, and all of that kind of encounters, in an open world even, I think it falls off. and it's not that good. I think for me it's an A tier build because it's like, it doesn't have that good DPS, but Fractals carries it in A tier. So because Fractals are also PvE, I think that's an I tier. If I would completely exclude Fractals, I think it would even be B tier. I think it's not that good. And then we have Vindicator. Vindicator got now Alacrity access, but you lose a lot of damage for it and you're not that flexible. So I personally feel an offensive Alacrity Vindicator is an interesting concept, but I feel like it struggles with the utility and the damage output. So I personally think it's B tier for me. It works, but it's with an asterisk. I think it's low B tier for me, personally. Maybe it's even C tier depending on who you ask, but I feel like it's at least the build exists. Maybe I'm a little bit wrong or a bit harsh on that. We will see what the future tells. Maybe there are some crazy builds that I just haven't seen yet, but I feel like for now it's in B tier. And let's talk about Guardian. I mean, Guardian, what can I say? It has 2 really good elite specs, which is Firebrand, which is really underrated. I think Firebrand is an S tier build because it has so much flexibility in the kit and it has really good damage while also being quite, so to say, good in the upkeep if you position correctly. It's really a build that you need position correctly, but if you do that consistently, it's actually a really good build. I think Firebrand, offensive support Firebrand is really underrated. Then we have Willbender. I think Willbender is also quite good. It has forced movement, but the base kit of Guardian is so good that I would say Alacrity Willbender, DPS Willbender, is actually surprisingly good. And yes, it needs target to upkeep it, but I think it's a low S tier build for me. I think it's really good and has very good utility in the kit. You know, stand your ground, sanctuary, whatever you need, and that's really good. Yes, you might lose some damage for that, but I think in general that's worthwhile. That's why it's an S tier, while you have so good utility and flexibility with this build. By the way, if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe, because I have way more tier lists coming up, and if you enjoyed this one, be sure to leave a like. That helps out my channel quite a lot. Thanks. And now let's talk about the medium armor classes. So let's start with Ranger. Ranger is interesting because you have Druid, and I think Druid is one of the only builds that I would say you either play full support or you play full DPS, but you don't play offensive DPS because it's like feeling just very clunky and not really made for that. So I think it's C tier. You can do that. You can, but it's not very good in my opinion. That's why it's in C tier. So you can still play it in most encounters, but I would say that there are better options. For example, Untamed. I think Untamed is very good as an offensive support. It does nice damage. It has potentially good CC and good utility in the kit. It doesn't have like the craziest amount of boon output, but it is, I would say, very decent to be played. So I think it's a decent A tier build. And I personally think with those A tier builds, it's really hard. I think Untamed and Berserker are higher than Renegade and Herald. So I'm not sure. Maybe I have to make an A- tier or something, because it's like they are still good, don't get me wrong, but there is a clear split, I would say here. Elect Spectre, or in general Spectre, got buffed like crazy, and I would say Spectre is now an S tier build. It has amazing utility, crazy good CC, and good damage as an Alacrity DPS build. I think it's just a very good all-around base kit. It's a Condi build, that's the negative part. It's only played Condi, you can't play a power one, but I feel like Firebrand has the same issue. So in general, I think Spectre really good as an offensive supporter, really, really good. And then you have Deadeye. Oh, Deadeye. You can play a Quickness DPS Deadeye that has crazy good DPS. You can play a Unload Quickness DPS that is also very good and very, very easy to play. But they both have the issue that they are a little bit like single target focused, and I would say not as flexible in what they can bring to the table. So I would put it in A tier, low A tier for me. It works as a build and is decent. But I personally think it's not as broken as, definitely not as the S tier builds, and also not as broken as those two builds, I would say. Maybe we have to demote this one, even though it's easy to play. I think it's too gimmicky for most situations, and the DPS is insane, yes. I'm really torn with where to put those three, and if to put them in B tier as well, but I will leave them now in low A tier for now. And let's go to Engineer. So we have Scrapper. I think Scrapper is insane. It provides a lot of self-barrier, has crazy good quickness uptime and other boons as well. It is very nice because it's very unique with the super speed access that it has. It's just a very good S tier build. Just straight up very, very good S tier build. Then we have Mech. Mech is like a little bit annoying in my opinion to play, because the Mech you have to take care of where he stands and that kind of stuff. But I think the Alacrity uptime is decent enough. It is a little bit not as overcapping as other builds. So for that reason, I think Alacrity Mech is easy to play. From the DPS side, the DPS is okay as well. I think personally low A tier. is okay as well. With an asterisk, because you really have to enjoy mech to play this build, in my opinion. I think it's not a build that I would recommend to players that don't want to have any pets with them. Let's now go to the light armor classes. So we have Alacrity DPS Scourge. It is, in my opinion, very easy to play. It's a little bit of a high APM build, but it's still very easy to play. You just have to spam your buttons of cooldown, and it's very safe. It does not the crazy amount of damage, and it's a condi build only, but it has very good utility in the kit with cleanses, with barrier, and boon corrupts even. So I think it's overall a very good kit for an offensive supporter. The damage is not as high as other S tier builds, but I think it's still worthwhile to be put in S tier because of its just flexibility and ease of use. Then we have Quickness DPS Harbinger. You can play it as power or condi. It has crazy good damage. It has decently easy rotation, but the problem is it doesn't have the craziest amount of flexibility. It has some usefulness in the skills, but I would say because of its like melee focus on supporting boons and stuff, and also the just general aggressiveness, and you're not that tanky, you have quite forced movement in there. So I think personally high A tier, but you could make the argument that it's even better than that. But I think high A tier is like where it deserves. I think it's a very good build that actually is very fun to play as well. And very good in Fractals, for example, as a condi build there as well. So Elementalist got like giga buffed with the recent balance patch. It's really, really good. So Tempest, in my opinion, S tier, really, really good build now. Alacrity DPS Tempest, really, really strong, really easy to play, really good. Damage, condi, power, everything works. It's really good. I think it's highly recommended. It's not even that high APM for an Elementalist build, so I think it's really, really good to get into in an Elementalist. Then we have Catalyst. Quickness DPS Catalyst is like insane with the boon output and is like a piano to play, yes, but I think if you like that playstyle, you have crazy good boon output, damage output, and with the Bloodstone Relic even, it's like insane how much damage you can do. I think because of that, it's an S tier build for me. The utility skills are not that crazy, but just the boon output that you provide, you can like help your healer so much with the boons you put out. It's crazy, and you have just so much damage as well on that. It's just a very good, very easy to upkeep the boons and quickness. I think it deserves an S tier spot, even though the flexibility of it is a little bit lackluster, I would say. And then let's go last to Mesmer, which again got like insane buffs as well with the balance patch, especially Mirage. So I personally think offensive support Necromancer, condi or power, both of them are insane. The DPS might not be the highest in those, but I think the utility that Necromancer has, while also being able to provide an immense amount of boons and being either alacrity or quickness support, it's insane. I think offensive Necromancer really good after patch still, even though they somewhat nerfed the improved alacrity trait, but it's still, I would say, a really cool trait and really cool interaction, even though they nerfed it and made it a little bit different how to gear this as a power variant, but still very good option. And then we have last but not least Mirage. So they completely reworked how Mirage applies alacrity, and this makes it very interesting how you can play it. You can play it very easily as some kind of offensive power Mirage, condi Mirage, everything works. You just have to spam your ambushes. And that's actually really interesting because you can still get the very useful Mesmer kit in there. The DPS might not be the highest than if you use all your utility skills for some just utility and not damage, but the general ease of use is actually quite high, and you can play it quite safely. I'm not sure if it deserves S tier yet, but I think it's high A tier or low S tier, depending on who you asked and how you play it. But I think offensive Mirage is actually, I would put it for now in high A tier, but maybe we will see some crazy cooks there. This is so to say with an asterisk. There are still some research going on here, but I think it's a really, really good build. Definitely try it out, and it's really fun. And yeah, with that, I think the tier list is done. You can see it's actually quite top heavy. Just a few builds, in my opinion, are not that crazy good. Maybe those 4 builds are also not that insane. I think there is a clear split between high A tier and low A tier. But let me know your comments down below. I think it's very, of course, a personal take. Maybe I have some personal biases here, but I think it's somewhat, I explained myself quite well, I would say. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like that. Way more tier lists coming up, so be sure to keep an eye on that. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for all my supporters on YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon that help me keep the lights on. I hope to see you all in the next video.